Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I am bringing you a classics book haul. I can already feel your judgment. Do I already have a ton of books that I haven't read? Specifically a ton of classic books that I haven't read? Yes. Have I just bought more? Also yes. When bookshops opened here in Ireland, I didn't have intentions of buying a lot of stuff. But I went to one secondhand bookshop and they had a lot of Penguin English Library books, which you're probably aware I collect these books. If you're interested in my classics collection, do subscribe to the channel because I'm going to be making quite a few videos around my Penguin English Library collection in the coming weeks. Often what has happened with me collecting these books is that I will buy quite a lot at one time when I can find a load of them in a particular shopping trip, and I think often what has happened there is maybe someone else has like donated their collection, so there's loads of these books there, and that is exactly what happened this time. So I have this stack of books to talk to you about. Some of these I have read before, so they're not adding to my TBR, so I'm gonna start with those ones. And as ever with my classics videos, I'm gonna be very honest with you guys. I am gonna tell you about how much, or more often than not, how little I know about these books. Going into them and seeing what my preconceptions are, I picked up Passing by Nella Larsen, which was a piece of fiction written during the Harlem Renaissance, and it is about colorism in the African American community. I thought this book was really fantastic, and I am going to be donating the version that I originally read this book in because I don't really feel like I need 2 copies despite loving this book. Like, I would rather put my other edition back into the world for someone else to enjoy. The Murder in the Rue Morgue and Other Tales by Edgar Allan Poe. I have actually read all of Edgar Allan Poe's short stories. I read all of them in my first year of university and I had a really great time reading them and studying them. The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This is a piece of American fiction and it has a lot to do with kind of like slut shaming and the tensions between a woman's private existence and public existence. This wasn't a favourite classic for me, but I'm glad that I've read it nonetheless, and I'm glad that I now have a copy for my collection. Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I read this a couple of years ago and I really liked it. In this book we follow Clarissa Dalloway, who is the wife of an MP, and she is organising a party on a summer's day in June. And it's also about another character named Septimus Smith who is dealing with what is essentially like PTSD. This is a classic that I really enjoyed reading. I absolutely love this edition. You know that I absolutely love like dusty pink on anything. So again, very glad that this is in my collection now. And the final book that I have read is The Sign of Four by Arthur Conan Doyle. I read a lot of Arthur Conan Doyle when I was maybe about 16 or 17. I know I've not read all of the Sherlock stories, but this is one that I'm fairly certain I have read. But because I read quite a lot of them in very like quick succession, they have all kind of blurred into one. I am like 95% sure that this is one that I've read though. I really enjoy the Sherlock stories. I kind of like that you're not supposed to figure it out. And I think there's something that is quite cozy about Arthur Conan Doyle's writing as well. So those are the 5 that I have read. Now on to the 9 that I haven't read. And as ever, when I'm talking about classic books, I am going to be very like honest and upfront with you guys with regards to how much, or more often than not, how little I know about these books. I think sometimes with classics there is a lot of stuff that even if you haven't read them, you've kind of absorbed by osmosis just because they're in kind of like popular culture. And that can sometimes mean you have misconceptions about what the books are, or in fact, you may know quite a lot about them. And I'm going to be completely honest with you guys about how much or little I know about these books. First up, I have Silas Marner by George Eliot. Now, George Eliot is one of my favourite classic novelists of all time. Middlemarch is one of my favourite novels ever. And I've read a few more of her books as well. Nothing that I've ever loved as much as Middlemarch. And I've accepted that I probably won't love any of her novels as much as I loved Middlemarch, but I do know that this was her personal favourite of the novels that she wrote. Do I know what it's about? No, but it's by George Eliot, so I'm pretty confident that I'm going to really enjoy it. Also, I'm very glad it's shorter than other George Eliot books I've read. In fact, a lot of these books are quite short, and I was particularly delighted to add some shorter books onto my classics TBR, because a lot of them are chunky boys, and I don't always have time for chunky boys. Although I did finish reading The Portrait of a Lady last month, so if you want to hear my thoughts on that, I will leave it linked down below in the description and in the cards so you can find out my thoughts on my latest classic read. That might be a good way of doing this actually. I'm going to stick with the authors that I have read books from before. So I have Sanditon by Jane Austen. So I think this was written just before Jane Austen died, and this edition also includes Lady Susan, which was published posthumously, and also fragments of I think what the Watsons. I think it's going to be quite an interesting experience reading a book like this, because I guess these stories aren't going to be like fully polished or fully formed. So this is definitely not something that I would recommend if you haven't read Jane Austen before. I've read all of her 6 like full-length novels. So I think reading this is going to be like a curious experience. But I'm expecting the same sort of like sassy tone that there is in Jane Austen's other novels, mixed in with like social commentary. Next I have Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. I read The House of Mirth I think last year, and it was such a pleasant surprise for me. I enjoyed it so much more than I expected to, so I have quite high hopes for this one going into it. All I know is that it is about a married couple who live and work in a farm, and the wife's cousin comes to stay with them, and then the husband is like, hello, and I am so here for that drama. I have 2 books by H.G. Wells, so I have The Time Machine and The Island of Dr. Moreau. The Time Machine has a pretty much what it says on the tin title. It is about a time machine, but I think they go like very, very far into the past. And then The Island of Dr. Moreau, I think, is about a shipwreck, a lone survivor of a shipwreck, and his like experiments when he's on an island. I've read The War of the Worlds previously, and I found it a really interesting read, less from like a storytelling and narrative perspective, but almost more as like an historical source. I'm not someone that reads a lot of sci-fi, particularly contemporary sci-fi. Like hard sci-fi isn't really something that interests me, but I think classic sci-fi is really interesting because it gives you a perspective of what were the concerns of the people in that moment in history, you know, what were the things that were going on in scientific development that they were worried about, that they were cautious about, that they were excited about. And now, having, you know, gone through those technological or scientific changes, how valid were those concerns? So I think that's a perspective that I really value in classic sci-fi, so I'd be really excited to read these 2. Moving away from those slim classics, we have a big old chunky boy in David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. I've read a few Dickens novels now, and I've enjoyed them to varying degrees. David Copperfield isn't one that I really know anything about. This is really heavy. I know it's meant to be like a classic coming of age story, but that's all I really know about it. I do know I really wanted to watch the film. Maybe what I might do before I tackle this beast is I might actually watch the film first. Does anyone else do that with classics, to like wrap your head around the story a bit more before you go into the novel? Let me know down in the comments what your approach to these things is. Now on to authors that I haven't read before. I have A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. I have read, I think, maybe a chapter of this or an extract of this. Like, we read it for like an exercise, I think, at uni. Like, we didn't read the whole novel or anything. It was just part of it. Oh no, I remember what it was. So it was at an open day at my university, and I was like a student at the time who was working at the open day. 1, because I was a nerd, 2, because they paid me, and 3, there was always snacks left over. But I remember in one of the like sessions that one of the lecturers did for the prospective students, he would give like an extract of a book, and you had to like close read it and see if you could see how much you could figure out about the book with just an extract from it. And then at the end, like if anyone had a guess of what the book was, then they could guess. And once it was A Room with a View, but I don't actually remember anything about the book. Howard's End is one of the next classics that I want to read like quite soon, and I think that's gay. It might be gay. Is this gay? I don't really know. I might have completely made that up. The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. I hear a lot of great things about Wilkie Collins' writing, but I've never read one of Wilkie Collins' books before. I think his books are like creepy mystery books. I don't know anything about like the specifics of the plots of any of his books, but maybe it would be a good read for like around Halloween time. If you've read any Wilkie Collins, let me know down in the comments if I should be saving his books for Halloween. And the final book I have is The Cup and the Anthem and Other Stories by O. Henry. Don't know anything about this author, don't know who they are. I know they're American, and maybe these short stories are set in various parts of America. I don't know. I really just don't know anything about this book. But I think the cover of it is really, really cool. Anyways, they are all of the classic books that I am hauling today. Oh, am I gonna tell you where my physical TBR is now? I guess I have to. So, my physical TBR now stands at this number. Not gonna say too much about that, but that is not factoring in any of the books that I've already read this month. Do I have another book haul coming up this month as well? Maybe. Have you read any of these books? What did you think of them? Are there any of these that you think are really going to be up my street when it comes to my classics TBR? Are there any of them that I should be really prioritizing? I do eventually want to read the vast majority of my Penguin English Library books, but it's like a long-term lifetime goal. It's not something that I want to do like imminently, although I did set myself a goal of reading 10 of my Penguin English Library books this year, and I'm not massively on track with that goal, so maybe some of these shorter ones will help me achieve that. That is all I'm going to talk about today. I hope you guys are doing well, and I will speak to you in my next video.